Kurt Baker, Baker Drivetrain. Today we're going to install a DD6 transmission in this 2002 Road King. The bike has the stock 5-speed in it. The primary drive, the starter, the right side exhaust has all been removed. The complete job to remove the existing 5-speed and install a 6-speed is probably about a 5-hour job. The actual transmission part of it, in other words, the removal of the stock transmission and the reinstallation or the installation of the new transmission, the 6-speed, is about a 30 to 45 minute job, believe it or not. So that means there's a good 4 hours spent in removing the primary drive, the starter, the exhaust, all the claptrap that prevents you from gaining access to the actual transmission. Okay, so left side transmission removal. I'm going to go ahead and remove the drive pulley. Before you can loosen that nut, you got to take the retaining plate off. Okay, so the big 1 7/8 inch nut. We sell the socket. It's available through us. It's available through elsewhere as well. The key is it needs to be a deep throat socket to clear the main shaft here. Keep in mind the threads here are left-hand threads, so we need to go in the tighten direction to loose. Okay, got that nut off. With that nut off, you go ahead and grab on the pulley, pull it off, set it aside. I like to tuck the belt behind the main shaft there just to get it out of the way. While I'm over here, I'm going to go ahead and remove the retaining ring from the ratchet pawl, as well as the centering pin for the ratchet pawl. The centering pin requires a Torx 50 bit. Sometimes I can't find my Torx 50 bit, so I can improvise with a 1/4 inch Allen bit. Okay, there's the centering pin. I'm going to go ahead and remove this teeny weeny retaining ring. I spread it wide open and got it out of there. It's not going to be reused. The washer here will be reused, and we'll touch on that at a later time. Okay, the next step is to remove the inner bearing race. Harley's used this style inner bearing race from 1985 to 2006. It worked well. One of the shortcomings is under higher power applications or higher mile applications, this bearing will walk. Typically it walks inboard, and you will know it when it's walked when you go to try to put this tool on to allow you to remove the race. As you can see, the tool won't go on behind the race to allow you to grab and draw it off. So I have a little trick I'm going to show you on the other side that will allow you to get this off. One of the common ways in the field for people to get these off is to take a cutoff wheel, make a little incision there across there, and effectively crack it in half and allow you to draw it off. The problem with that is quite often the cutoff wheel goes into the main shaft, carves a big line in the main shaft, and then the main shaft from that point is junk and can't be reused or resold or whatever. So with that, let's go over to the other side, continue the removal of the 5-speed transmission from the right side. I'm going to start the gear set removal process from the right side by removing the oil spout to get it out of the way. It'll give us clearer access to remove the top cover and then the pillow block shift drum assembly that resides right under the top cover. With the oil spout out of the way, you can see we got clear access to the top cover screws. There's 5 of them. Get that top cover out of the way, make sure and take the gasket with it. And we have the shift drum and pillow block assembly right there in plain view. I'm going to go ahead and remove the 4 screws that bolt it to the top of the transmission case. I'm going to go ahead and pull those 4 screws out just to make my life easier. And after that, we're going to show you a little trick to get the ratchet pawl out of the way. You want to get the ratchet pawl lever out of the way to allow free clearance to get the shift drum pillow block assembly out of there. There's a small spring that keeps the ratchet pawl claw in place on the shift drum. What I'm going to do is move that spring up, push it out of the way carefully, and that allows you to flip the lever back. And with the lever flipped back, that shift drum pillow block assembly comes right off. One thing to note is the shift drum pillow block assembly mounts to the top of the transmission case and is located with 4 dowels. Quite often those dowels will pull out and stay with the pillow block. So when you remove the shift drum pillow block assembly, just inspect that all 4 dowels are in the case. If one is stuck in the pillow block there, take it out, stick it back in the top of the case, because you'll want those there for the DD6 shift drum assembly installation. Okay, with the top stuff removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the side cover and the door bolts, and let's rock and roll. Take the side cover assembly, which is the clutch actuator and the gasket, off the door. This is the throwout bearing and slinger assembly. Go ahead and remove that as well. I want to go ahead and take the shift fork rod and shift forks, get them out of the way. Feed it out the door, remove it as such. Take the forks, there's 3 of them, get them out of the way. Another thing you want to do at this time is go ahead and remove the speed sensor. The DD6 builder's kit comes with a shim that goes underneath that speed sensor that spaces it out correctly relative to the gear teeth that trigger that sensor. A thing to keep in mind is the proximity of the end of the sensor relative to the gear teeth needs to be about 40 to 60 thousandths for correct speedometer function. If you were to reinstall the speed sensor without the shim provided with a DD6 kit, the end of that sensor would contact the gear teeth. That's going to wipe out and destroy your speed sensor. So while we're thinking about it, let's just get it out of the way right now. And it's an O-ring slip fit, and so once you remove that screw, you just work it out of the hole, set it aside, put the screw over here, and it's all staged for reinstallation. At this time, we're going to go ahead and remove the door bolts. There's 6 of them. As pointed out earlier, on the left side, the inner bearing race had walked into the main drive gear. And here's a neat trick to allow you to get the removal tool behind that inner bearing race to allow you to pull it off. Reach inside there, push over the gears, in other words, engage them with adjacent dogs to allow you to lock the shafts. With more than one gear engaged at once, it fixes the shafts from rotating. And what I'm going to do is take a 1 1/16 inch socket and loosen this nut on the main shaft. I'm going to remove it actually. Okay, underneath that nut's going to be a little washer there. Go ahead and remove it. Set it aside for now. All right, dead blow hammer. I love dead blow hammers. They're gentle, but they exact a nice force. And in this case, we're going to tap the end of that main shaft to move it over, which will allow us the room to get the removal tool underneath or behind that inner bearing race. And you'll see the amount of threads sticking out of that bearing. What I want to do is I want to force with the dead blow hammer that main shaft inward, roughly 3/16 to 1/4 inch. Okay, you can see that the main shaft has moved. It's shifted over to the left. With that, we'll go back over to the left side and we'll use our inner bearing race removal tool, get that inner bearing race out of the way. Okay, I have the inner bearing race removal tool. Before using this tool, I like to go ahead and put some anti-seize or WD-40, whatever you got on these threads, because these threads work really hard. The race has a significant amount of press onto the main shaft. Previously, you saw that we were unable to get the race removal tool behind that race by using the trick on the right side and forcing the main shaft out slightly. It allowed us to get the tool on here, and then it allows us to remove the inner bearing race. All right, lights out. That's how it works. Continuing with the gear set removal process, I'm going to take my dead blow hammer, reach across the bike, tap the end of the main shaft to knock the trapdoor off the case dowels. And when it gets off the dowels, you'll know it becomes loose like this. You go ahead and draw the gear set out. That's what's known as a cartridge style gear set. The shafts and gears are all mounted to this trapdoor assembly. One thing to note, the right side dowel here, it's a 5/16 split pin dowel, often comes out with the trapdoor. And so you're going to want to remove that from the trapdoor, reinstall it in the case when you get ready to install the DD6. Okay, with the gear set removed, the ratchet pawl, you rotate it down, it'll slide out like so. Boom, ratchet pawl's out of the way. The last step in the gear set removal process is to draw the main drive gear out of the left side bearing. To do that, we have tool A, as we call it. It's a plate, and the first step is to mount this plate to to the right side of the case, and you use a couple of the threaded trapdoor holes here to retain the plate. You can just thread these screws in by hand because the force is going to be in that direction. The screws just kind of need to hold it in place. This plate has a recess in it, a hex-shaped recess in it, such that when you run this draw bolt through, the hex, the female hex, sits and holds your right side in place. So on the left side, in a minute, when we're over there, we can focus on the left side and work in the wrench on the left side to draw that main drive gear out. And with that, let's move over to the left side. Continuing with the removal process of the main drive gear, I have the draw rod coming through the left side here. I'm going to put the end plate on there like so, the bearing, the washer, and the nut. Okay, that feels good. 3/4 inch wrench. And you can see incrementally that main drive gear is being drawn through that bearing. All right, you see that main drive gear just pop through like that, and it's pulled through. I'm going to go ahead while I'm on the left side here. I'm going to remove the sprocket spacer seal and the left side snap ring and the left side bearing to get it ready for the DD6 installation. I'm going to pop that seal out. This retaining ring for the left side bearing is a very large retaining ring. You can remove that retaining ring with a big set of snap ring pliers, but I don't advise it. I highly advise the Viking set of locking snap ring pliers. And that's how it's done, son. All right, we got that ornery bastard out of there. One neat thing about Harley cases from a service standpoint is that this bearing on the left side, if it's not excessively heat cycled, can be pulled out with your fingers. And I got it. Boom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean up the case, get it ready for the DD6 hardware. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to remove this ratchet pawl seal because one's provided with the kit. Got all the hardware off of there. Got the main drive gear out, and with that I'm going to move over to the right side and we'll get ready for the DD6 installation process. At this point we're starting the DD6 gear set installation. The first step is really to go back over to the left side, install the new main drive gear bearing, the new main drive gear retaining ring, and then the new pawl seal over on the left side. So all of that's done right now. What I need to do is draw the main drive gear through the main drive gear bearing with the tool A. I want to point out something on the Baker 6-speed DD6 as well as the OD6 features a floating magnet. Typically on a Harley transmission there's a very small magnet on the end of the drain screw. In typical Baker fashion we felt that a bigger magnet is better, overkill is better, more is better, and so our magnet is much larger, and it's mounted on the inside of the trapdoor. And one thing to note is that it does float on the screw by design. So we've had calls before, people say, you know, the screw that retains the magnet is not seated all the way. Well, that's not the case. It's by design, it allows the magnet to float up and down about 1/4 of an inch. We're going to draw the DD6 main drive gear bearing through the left side here with the tool A components. Feed this through the right side to the left. Be very careful with the threads of the draw screw to make sure they don't harm this this seal on the end of the main drive gear. Okay, there's a 3/4 inch nut here, and the head of the drawbar screw is 3/4 as well. So I'm going to grab a couple 3/4 inch wrenches here. Whenever using these installation tools or removal tools, you encounter a lot of friction or force that doesn't really make sense. Back away from the job, take a look at what's going on. You know, try to figure out if there's an interference or some reason. You know, normal operation of these installation or removal tools doesn't require a whole lot of effort, with the exception of the inner primary bearing race removal tool. So it feels like it's home. I'm going to go ahead and remove the tool. Okay, I see the full splines. These are the splines that the drive pulley mounts to. I see all those splines through the inside of the bearing, and so that sucker looks like it's pulled to seat. While I'm over on this side, I'm going to go ahead and apply a generous amount of tranny lube to this seal on the end of the main drive gear, as well as this bearing. This outside bearing here being located so far from the sump oil that resides in the tranny case, this outside bearing It needs a little lube out of the chute to effectively prime the pump of oil circulating through it. I'm going to go ahead and install the ratchet pawl that comes with the kit. When I removed the 5-speed transmission, I took this little spring and kind of flipped it aside that allowed me to flip that pawl back like that. I advise that you go ahead and do that at this point. It'll allow easy installation of the shift drum and pillow block assembly. Slide it through like so. You hear it go snap. It's home. I'm going to set it there so that it's staged for the next step in the installation from the right side. I'm going to install the new washer supplied with the kit and the new 7/16 external retaining ring. It's a little retaining ring, but that's really all that's required. Just confirm that it snaps shut and that it's installed. Looks good. I removed the stock non-adjustable centering pin when I removed the 5-speed. With the DD6 builder's kit, we supply an eccentric adjusting screw that allows you a little more adjustability to dial in your shift quality. So you can see what happens when I install the adjustment screw. It's changing the location of the ratchet pawl, thereby changing its relationship to the pins on the end of the drum. It just allows you to dial in your shift quality a lot better. Okay, the case is all prepped. I have the main drive gear there in place. I have the ratchet pawl installed. Having both of those in place prior to feeding the gear set through is necessary. A trick I use to avoid these clutch splines on the main shaft from cutting the seal on the end of the main drive gear as you feed the gear set through is to wrap this with electrical tape. I'm going to hang the gasket provided with the kit on the door dowels here. Tuck it down, make sure it's home. I'll grab the gear set and I'm going to gingerly slide it through the main drive gear, and I'm going to slide it up to the point where it's just kind of sitting on the door dowels. Now you may find that you have to rotate the gear set a little bit to get the main drive gear to mesh with the mating countershaft gear. With the gear set in place, right up next to the door dowels, I'm going to take the dead blow hammer and tap the trapdoor home. Be careful never to hit the end of the shafts with the dead blow, but tapping it on the side of the door is perfectly fine. You'll hear the audible pitch of the blows change when that door hits the gasket. And with that, we're going to install the screws that retain the door to the case. I recommend using blue Loctite on the screws. We're going to reinstall the stock exhaust bracket. Go ahead and put blue Loctite on these. Once again, I like to tighten all screws during the assembly process by hand, just so you can feel what's going on. Make sure you got good thread engagement. I want to tighten these down by hand. They can be torqued to 12 to 18 foot-pounds. And I'm going to go ahead and install the top two 1/4-20 screws using blue Loctite as well. With the gear set in place, one of the first things I'm going to do is make sure it rotates and spins freely. Occasionally, on the inside of the case, above the first gear on the countershaft, some clearancing is required on the case. Harley cases, the castings are very good, but the location of the walls does float, and occasionally it floats in the wrong direction, causes an interference. I'd say about 1% of the time that happens. So the way to check if you have any interference or issues is to reach in and spin that over as such, and just listen for the presence of noise, make sure everything's spinning over freely, which in this case it is, so we're good to go. The next step in the process, I'd like to go ahead and put the spacer for the speed sensor and then mount the speed sensor in the speed sensor hole. With the gear set installed, it's time to install the shift system, which includes the shift forks first and then the shift drum pillow block assembly. A couple things about the DD6 shift system. The forks are billet construction and they're hard chrome plated for wear resistance. Hard chrome is what, about 80 Rockwell C, and the gears themselves are between 58 and 62 Rockwell C. And so hard chrome for wear resistance is really the way to go for long-term durability. The other thing to mention, the shift drum pillow block assembly. Our shift drum pillow block assembly has a couple of cool features. It has a roller detent for super smooth shifting and a torsional spring. It also has a redundant neutral detent, which makes it a heck of a lot easier to find neutral. That's a pretty neat piece. Another feature, another part of this though, is that it's a fixed spindle design, which means there's a static spindle that the drum rotates on, and virtually frictionless. And so that just improves shift quality that much better when anytime you take friction out. Refer to the DD6 installation instructions for where to place the forks in the gear set, but they are labeled. This one, for example, is labeled 2MS, which means second gear on the main shaft. And so I will put that in place on the second gear. The next fork is labeled 3CS, third gear countershaft. And put it there. The last fork is labeled 4-5 main shaft. That's for the 4-5 dog clutch. That's right here on the inside of the trapdoor. I'm going to feed the fork rod through the right side of the transmission case. Goes through the bores of those forks, goes into place, and at this point I'm also going to turn over, center up these gears, and just make sure everything spins over freely. Just make sure there's no binding, no goofy noises. At this point, I'm going to take the oil provided with the kit and pour some of it over the top of the forks and the gears. Rotate that around to distribute it. Pour no more than an ounce or two on there. With the ratchet pawl arm flipped out of the way, installing the shift drum pillow block assembly is pretty simple. I usually like to take the shift drum pillow block assembly and put it in neutral. You see the end stop there with the dowel hole in the end. The next bump up is neutral. We have the forks, the fork rod in place, and the next step is to put the shift drum pillow block assembly on there. You're going to have to reach around behind here and move the forks around a little bit to align them with the tracks in the drum. You pretty much know when you found it because it drops into place. And you should be able to push the pillow blocks over the case dowels with your fingers. Once again, if you find yourself having to force anything, you're doing something wrong, stop what you're doing, back away, and take a look at what's going on. With the shift drum pillow block in place, I'm going to take the 4 retaining screws, blue Loctite on them, and install them into their respective locations. With the shift drum pillow block assembly in place, it's time to flip this ratchet pawl back over. You can see with the pawl arm flipped around, the spring in its intended position, it by design does that, and it tracks the drum as you shift through the gears, either upshifting or downshifting. On the left side, we'll perform the ratchet pawl adjustment. The ratchet pawl adjustment is performed with the transmission in third gear. So I'm going to take this lever. You know, I installed it. I installed the shift drum pillow block assembly with it in neutral, so I know it's in neutral. I'm going to upshift to second. I'm going to upshift to third. Now we're in third gear. You may find to upshift, you may have to rotate the gears to get the dogs to line up, but that's just the nature of the beast. It's in third gear now, and we're going to take a look at the location of the ratchet pawl relative to the two pins there. I can see that the eccentric screw needs to rotate this roughly there to center it up on the two pins. And so I have it in the right location, and I'm going to, I have a little blue Loctite on this retaining nut here. I'm going to hold the screw in place, and then tighten that down as so. I like the way it looks. If you do not get this ratchet pawl adjustment right, you'll find that upshifts will be nice and crisp, but downshifts may be vague, or you may miss a downshift. Or vice versa, you may find that upshifts are faulty and you miss gears, and downshifts are fine. If you have this adjustment dialed right in, both upshifts and downshifts will be crisp and nice, and you'll have no issues. I like to go ahead and install the quad seal before I install the sprocket spacer seal, so that I can really tuck it in the corner there and make sure it's home. This sprocket spacer seal, typically you can push it in with your fingers, and if you can't, you can take a dead blow hammer and just tap it around the perimeter carefully. I'm pushing it in here, and it's seated below the left side surface, so as far as I'm concerned, it's home. I'm going to take the existing sprocket spacer that came out because it was in reasonable condition. I'm going to tuck it back in like that. I'm going to take the drive pulley that came off, and to reinstall the drive pulley onto the new main drive gear, quite often you'll have to loosen the axle adjuster and pull the rear wheel forward a little bit to create some slack. I'm going to try to install this without. Sometimes you get lucky, just like that. With the pulley on, I'm going to put red Loctite on this pulley nut. I'm going to put red Loctite on the retaining plate screws, and my left side will be buttoned up. Because we're going to be using a high torque bearing in place of the stock inner primary bearing race, there's no need to install this, and I'll show you what the high torque bearing looks like here in a minute. On the left side, I have the option of reinstalling the stock inner primary bearing race, and as you saw with the stock 5-speed, it had walked into the main drive gear. The problem with it walking is if it walks into the seal on the end of the main drive gear, it'll cause that seal to leak, and then you'll have a big mess on your rear wheel. Instead of installing the stock inner bearing race, I'm going to install the high torque bearing, which we sell, and the related seal. The high torque bearing installs into the inner primary in place of the existing bearing. The seal, the high torque bearing seal, replaces the stock factory seal as well. And I'm going to go ahead and install this when the left side is put back together. Time to install the top cover. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the stock neutral switch and install the neutral switch that's provided with the kit. It's the stock neutral switch is normally open, and you got to replace it with a normally closed switch, which is provided with the kit. Slide it over. I've applied blue Loctite to the top 5 screws, top cover screws. Snug works for me. Reinstall the side cover with the gasket provided with the kit. Don't forget to put your right side push rod that came off. Get your stock side cover. You'll feel it kind of click onto those dowels that are part of the door assembly. With blue Loctite on the screws, tighten them down. With the side cover installed, fasteners tightened with blue Loctite, I'm going to reinstall the engine oil spout here. And that concludes the installation of the DD6 gear set into the transmission case. One thing to keep in mind, the DD6 does overdrive the primary drive. When you put the clutch and primary drive components back on, remember to install the 28-tooth comp sprocket and the new chain and the fat adjuster shoe that's provided with the kit. That'll give you years and years of good service and easy highway touring.
For more information on the products featured here, please head to our website, DennisKirk.com.